Let's see. You disappeared there. Hello?
Did I? I'm still here.
Okay. Now I hear you. No, it's fine.
Oh, well, this might be, yeah, it might be a bit janky. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, of course. It's fine. I work with this, so at the same time, I think I would be able to figure it out. But when the solution is just turn the mic off and on, it is what it is, and so on. Computers.
Yeah. Yeah. They're working 1 second, and then they just seem to change their mind.
Basically. But like I said, if they wouldn't, I wouldn't have a job. So it's fine. I'm looking at it from a positive side.
You work where?
I actually work with in one of the Nordic country's biggest IT firms and companies that deliver IT operations to a lot of different companies and government here in Sweden, Norway, and Finland.
Cool.
Yeah, so I am an IT coordinator and team leader.
Yeah, a bit of an expert in this.
Yeah, but it doesn't always work for me as well.
Okay, well, this is the Sister Luna Psychic Services podcast, and we have a very special guest today, Rebecca Oscarsson. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Nice. She's a Swedish native and a practicer of heathenism, and we've got her on today to talk about the symbology of that religion or that path, and the ways that it's being co-opted by some folks we're not real big fans of lately. Rebecca, you told me you pass a number of runes just walking to work each day.
Oh yeah, that's correct. I live like you said, I'm a Swedish native. I live in Sweden, and I live. How could I say? I live around 40 minutes through from some of our biggest cities. Stockholm is one, Uppsala is another one, and it's also one of the areas where the North Germanic people, who is called the Vikings, lived and were most densely populated here in Sweden during the Viking times. So we do have a lot of how can I say symbolism and also trails from that time still around this area, with big rune stones, with old graveyards and all of it. So it's quite amazing, actually.
Yeah, that sounds really, really beautiful and fascinating. That's the type of, I don't know, that's the type of architecture that you don't really see. I feel like it's not as popular of a vacation spot as other parts of Europe, so you don't see pictures of it as much.
Yeah, exactly. And since they are kind of, we actually save a lot of them. So since I live on the countryside, I do have a lot of acres and so around me. And you just find them next to the acres, next to the roads, next to the fields, and they just stand there, and they usually are just some information about them. So if you want to just walk down to one and know kind of what is read and so on, it's just there.
Oh, cool. So it's in a remote location.
Yeah. So it's really some kind of an everyday life thing here. It's not that talked about, but it's there. But I guess it's kind of it's get to be a part of your regular life, when you just pass by it. You don't really reflect on it.
Right, when it becomes just wallpaper, when it's something you see all the time. Yeah. But I think if I was just walking through a random field in Sweden and saw an enormous runestone, I would have a small heart attack, and I would be so excited. If it was in the middle of nowhere, I'd be like, oh my god, what?
Yeah, they are everywhere. The funny thing is, if I can guess that for people like you who's not used to it or live in a country where there's much left of it or have ever been, it's this kind of really foreign and really cool thing. for us, we are at that part that a lot of archaeologists, they dig up so much crap from the Viking Age that they just burn it because there's too much. We have nowhere to store it
Oh
or
my
to do with
goodness.
it.
Burning historical artifacts. Wow.
Yeah. Especially coins and stuff.
I mean, we did that too, but it was kind of at the time of colonialism, just to destroy the people that were already here.
Yeah, that was very rude of us, Canadians.
Yeah. For us, it's just like, we have too much of this stuff. They left too much. We can't put it anywhere.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, but it's a big part of this country, much more than we like to think.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think the way you're describing seeing a rune, where you're at kind of near Uppsala, which is a part of Sweden that I am aware of because of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo books.
All right.
The Millennium series. Uppsala. But seeing a rune is like no big deal. It's kind of boring. Yeah. Whereas in Calgary, I think the version of that in the part of Canada where we live is like seeing a statue of a bull or a horse or something. They're real big on ranching. It's part of Canada.
Yeah, I understand. But yeah, it's a big part of us, and it is what it is.
Yeah. So, is there any, because you do practice like some of the, Viking type, like pagan.
Yeah. So, wait, I need to get in it. I practice what we call Northern Magic. I'm unsure if that is what you guys or other parts of the world call Northern Magic, because I have experienced there's a big difference. Some people say that the classical Asatru is Northern Magic. It's not for me. I do not go out and sacrifice animals to the gods.
Right.
I do not work with the gods. I do not practice that kind, because that's for me is the religion Asatru. So it's the faith of the Asar, which is humans in Northern mythology. And that's not what I'm practicing. What I'm practicing is what I call Northern Magic, which is an old ancestral part of the Northern Germanic people that lived in places during the Viking time in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Germany, England, and Holland. It's the same kind of group of people. It's North Germanic, and that religion they do. Some of them were in the faith of the Asatru, so runes and so much is a big part of it. It was their written language basically still, so it's still applicable, but it's not a godly faith like believing Odin or Freya or something like that.
Right. That's so interesting.
Yeah, so that's a really, really big pet peeve of mine when I watch social media and both American and Canadian and other people all around the world saying that kind of stuff, and I'm like, no, it's not really, but okay.
So you're practicing something that's from the same part of the world, but it's a different type of practice than worshiping the gods.
Yeah, that's basically what you can say. The interesting part about that, there's really actually a really good book on the subject that's called Northern Magic, that for everyone who would be interested in it should actually read, and they go through a lot of the history and what is called and the group of people who actually practice it, and it is with runes and such in it and why it is like that. But it's really important to different the Northern Magic and Asatru.
Oh, that's great. I was actually going to ask you if there was a book that you'd recommend, because I'm interested personally to go and read it. I haven't.
Hold on, check who is the author so you get the right. I have my computer in front of me so I can give you. It's called Northern Magic Runes Northern Magic, Runes, Mysteries, and Shamanism Rune, and it's by Edred Thorson.
John was pulling it up on his phone on Amazon, and he was holding the Amazon page in front of me, and I was reading it as you were saying it. He's very on top of things.
That's great. But yeah, that's the book. It's really good. I read it myself and so on, and it just came out. I think it's the second edition that just got published. So
cool.
yeah,
that's awesome. I looked up. I went on what's this website called? It's for basically checking to see if people are Nazis. Let's see. ADL.org/hate symbols. It was like a full list of all the symbols that like white supremacists are using lately. Mm-hmm. And there was a number of runes on there, and I was pretty bummed. And there was even a few Celtic symbols, and my practice does take a lot more from Celtic magic. And so seeing the Triskele on there, I was pretty bad because I've used that a lot, and I've drawn it on stuff. I never thought that anybody would, see that and think, that I'm a part of that. But
I can relate. I have the Icelandic Galdur Vegvisor tattooed on me, on my chest.
Right.
And that one is starting to gain a lot of popularity, and I'm like, no.
Oh no, yeah, it's already on there forever.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, it's just a compass. Stop it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's frustrating. Yeah.
So it's a big bummer, and I think that I think it's a bit harmful. It's good that sites like that exist, but it's a little bit harmful because it claims the symbols for a whole different for that instead of what it actually is, which is a part of heritage, but is a part of form and religion and magical faith and practicing magical faith and so on today. And to have websites, sure, it's good, to warn people, but it's taken out of context and making something it's not.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Well, it really helps to feed into the cycle, into the actual intents of the white supremacists is when they try to adopt these symbols. One of the big things is getting them recognized as hate symbols. It's that's not opposed to their ideology or opposed to what they're actually trying to accomplish. They are trying to make people feel unsafe and take innocuous or even positive symbols and turn them into something that they're not.
Yeah, that totally. And we have a huge problem with that here in Sweden. Huge. We do have, like all other countries, we do have a little bit of nationalism and neo-Nazis on the rise, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they are using, or for example, they try to band together their own. We're out patrolling the streets for the safety of the Swedish people, and they take it on themselves to call themselves Sons of Odin.
Oh, we have them here
we
too.
Have them here too.
Oh, really?
And Wolves of Odin.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I did not know. Jesus, yeah. I thought they were just here. That's a bigger problem. Oh well.
Yeah, they tend to show up at any type of rally that's meant to be positive. For example, an LGBTQ plus youth rally for gay straight alliances in schools or something like that. They'll just show up and ruin everybody's time. You got into an argument with one at that, didn't you?
That one was immigration focused, but
John gets into fights with people wearing that jacket with those.
I don't get in fights.
Well, not physical fights, arguments.
Yeah.
Verbal fights.
Yeah, I got it. I have not encountered one, thank God. So I haven't had the possibility, but yeah, I would as well probably, or at least ask them a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even a bad way to like throw a wrench in their plan, really, is to just keep them talking to you when you know that they're not going to convince you of anything, and then that's preventing them from talking to anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. But so, oh my God, I'm a little bit stunned actually. I
Yeah.
had no idea that they also were in Canada. And I guess
Well,
they're.
it's really unfortunate too, because like it's to the point where you have to be really skeptical of anyone that's wearing a rune or
Yeah.
Thor's
yeah.
hammer is a big one. When
Yeah,
people wear
for
the
sure.
Thor's hammer. And I think the Thor's hammer is great. I think Thor is a cool dude, and I think it's fine for people to worship him and wear his hammer, but it's always, if you see someone wearing that, then I'm looking at them and I'm checking, like, are they wearing boots with red laces? Are they wearing suspenders? Do they have a shaved head? Like, are there other things that are going to help me determine what the meaning of this hammer is to them?
Yeah,
You know?
totally. But similar, why I'm a little bit surprised there that you, not that you have maybe neo-Nazism or people with that kind of view. That's not that shocking. It's happening all over the world. But that you have that group over there is because I can sort of understand why a group here in Sweden or in Norway or in Denmark would take on that name, would take on that, because that is a kind of, because what I think is actually happening and why they take these symbols and what they do is super political. It is the whole discussion and discourse of white people does not have a culture. They don't do anything. This is really common in Sweden, and our government tried to whitewash us even more to say we do not have a culture. So people try to look back at a time where we were great, kind of. And trying to see their heritage and their ancestral path and where they come from, and therefore taking the runes, taking the symbols, and doing it kind of bring it forward in that kind of way. And I like I said, I can understand that is happening here, because like I said, I drive past rune stones on my way to work. It's undeniable that it's part of this land's history. But that is happening in Canada that way?
I think in Canada it's really more of just an excuse to be like a neo-Nazi more than it is a genuine, like, I don't know. I guess in their mind it's probably a combination of both, but I think,
Mind you, I know a lot of people also immigrated from Sweden, Norway, and so on to America and Canada, so it could be why as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think that a lot of the people that are adopting these symbols may or may not have some kind of that heritage, but I think moreover it's that as a colonial nation, Canada doesn't really have a history, or if you're to look at the history, it's pretty bad what the white people did. And if you go further, it's a non-white history. And so these people are kind of clinging to what they see as like a homogenous ethno state. They kind of flatten all white people into one shared history and are claiming that.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to mention to you, on that site where they were listing the hate symbols, on any one that was like a Nordic symbol, they did say, like, when you click on the link, it says, do not automatically assume that this person is a neo-Nazi because this is also used by people genuinely. They did point that out on there.
That's
but
great.
You have to click on it. You actually have to click on it to like see the full description in order to see that part, but it is on there.
It is on there, but it's a problem that you need to click on it, because people are short-minded, will just see that and be like, Nazi symbol.
For sure. And there's so many on the list. I was pretty shocked because I knew the hammer was a thing, and I knew the wolves of Odin was a thing. But it was like, let's see, Jira rune. I'm going to pronounce all these wrong. Elgit, the elk rune, Othala, Tyr, Valknot, and even the raven flag. They fly it. sometimes when they have like a, right? Yeah, it's so upsetting. And I've been wanting to make a bunch of protest signs for next time I go somewhere where they might be there that say like Fenrir eats Nazis, or like Nazis don't go to Valhalla, or something like that.
That's great though, but because the funny thing is with this list, and that is it. I think I told you this a little bit short of over Messenger, Madeline, but we actually had a legal let's see to find the word. English is not my native language.
Legal proceeding.
Yeah, exactly. To actually ban some of these symbols and some of the runes and actually put them as hate speech here in Sweden. So even though it's a part of our history, our government actually had that proposition up to actually make it illegal to have those scripted on you and other things to define it as hate speech. Thank God that did not go through. They got a lot of backlash, especially from the LARP community. They take that seriously. Yeah, I'm a LARPer myself. I would put that out there. But yeah, so I know a lot of it. So yeah, the LARP community, especially since they are the most ones, even though we have Northern paganism and Nordic magic, people who practice that, the LARPer group is bigger. They are not big, but we are not even big people in Sweden. We are just 10 million.
Right.
So if 100,000 LARPers make a big fuss, they will still be heard.
Yeah.
Thank God. So but that was a little bit surreal actually to have that up. Since it is a part of our history and this country history and so on. It's come on, even the old, how can you say it, capital of Sweden, Sigtuna, is still a thriving city. It still exists. It's actually told because a lot of people know about Stockholm, our capital today. But before, in the Viking Age, Sigtuna was basically the capital. But they got notion of plundering people that was coming to plunder and to destroy the city. So what they did was to put all the valuable things in kind of a big woodstock, basically, in a huge tree. And then they put it out in the water and pushed it away. And it actually floated ashore in Stockholm. That's why it's called Stockholm. A big tree stump in Swedish is stock. A big lumber is stock. And holm is a little shore, basically.
Cool.
That is so cool. Yeah.
So that's the story we learned in school, at least.
It's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool bit of history there.
So we still have all this. So it was a big shock when that even was considered.
Yeah. Well, that would not ever be even. That would never even come up here. People are so adamant about their free speech and their ability to say and wear and do whatever hateful things that they want. that would never even come up, I don't think, in any way people were voting on it or whatever.
Well, and it does make me wonder, obviously. It does make me wonder, groups like the Sons of Odin originated over there and do adopt all these Norse markings, these symbols. Do people opposed to them? Like, do the anti-fascists there use any of the same symbols?
No, they do not at all. Unfortunately, a few of our anti-fascist and left people, what's left in Sweden, is actually usually they hoping on the bandwagon on banning them. Unfortunately, a lot of the times they buy that up. Unfortunately, some people, especially to the most far left, which, mind you, is way more left than both in America and Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Because we usually joke about our right is America's left,
Mm-hmm.
and our left is further to the left. They're not communists, but they're socialist and a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you usually hope on that bandwagon that they rather ban it than have to deal with it, unfortunately.
That is kind of too bad. That was going to be one of my main questions, was like, do you think it's worth keeping the symbols and trying to take them back versus, you know, letting them turn into something terrible? And then if we're going to keep them and try to reclaim them, then how do we go about doing that? And there are a couple of people on the internet that I found who are trying to start little movements like that. A couple of different groups, but
well, and I think if you move to ban them, then you're ultimately accepting the premise of the fascists that are trying to use them, is that that's what the symbol means.
Yeah.
You're kind of giving up the game at that point.
Yeah, that's true, because the meaning of the symbol of the Othala, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like your lineage, like your home, the protection of your hearth, and so that's a meaning that I can see a white nationalist trying to twist and like adopt, but the meaning itself does not automatically lend itself to that use.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
What I understand, they usually use them as letters instead of symbols, especially in regular words. So they try to spell out stuff instead of have them symbolize, for example, protection or, you know, all of that. So they usually, use it to write their name or write what they want, or this one looks cool and stands for this god and therefore, and you're like, that's well uneducated of you, but sure.
Yeah, I think that's with the Tudor rune, right? The spear, because they use that a lot, and I feel like it's funny because one of the groups that I mentioned who's trying to oppose the use of the symbols in that way and reclaim them is, I guess it's not a group, it's hashtag that a guy started, hashtag League of Tudor, and so he's wanting people to adopt this hashtag and use it for that purpose, to reclaim the Nordic symbols from white nationalists.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, what I think we actually need to do, and this is actually not maybe the right time to take this up, but I will anyway.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I will bash our school system in Sweden. Because it all comes down to education, really. It really comes down to what we learn about ourselves and what we learn about our history. And for most Germanic people, mind you, we are mostly built up of the Western world. We are the one who's plundered. We are the one who has gone away and done the shit. We do have a heritage. We do have a culture on its own, even though it's so blended out into, you know, the Western culture today. But that doesn't mean we don't have history, and we need to focus more on the history and what's happened to kind of find ourselves and see where we have been, because I think a lot of it stands out from jealousy. Jealousy, for example, with the Native Americans or Native Canadians, that they have something they can call back to their roots, and they can't because they don't learn about it. And it's a wrong assumption to believe, for example, that the Vikings, by that, first of all, I hate that we call them the Vikings. The Viking was, it was called the Viking Age, sure.
Right.
And it's a time period here in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, around 800 after Christ, up to 1010, I think, after Christ. Up here, where some people, usually young men, decided to set offshore because there wasn't any girls back at home. It's actually true. Here's the whole thing is polygamy was actually accepted in the Viking in situation marks society. So the most powerful men took all the girls. And had all the girls. So there were none left for the younger ones or the lower standing ones. And all they wanted was to have a family and have kids, because that was what you could do back in the day. They did not have internet. So they set off to sail through Finland and Russia down to the Other Manic, and I don't know what the right call for it. It's somewhere in the Middle East. We call it the Ottomanska riket in Swedish. Catalonia and so on. Constantinople. That's around.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, Constantinople is where they traveled. There was the word. So they traveled there to take on job. They plundered and they needed food, and they were bigger and broader. There's a reason why people in the Netherlands and Sweden are still some of the tallest people on this earth, because we are the same kind of people from the beginning. Same kind of folk group, just settled down in different places, eat our food, and had our children. And what they did was they plundered. They took mostly Russian slaves, funny enough, sold them, and actually got hired as bodyguards in Constantinople. And down there, they're not even called Vikings. They called Rusar, or the Rus. And they just plunder. Usually they find a girl, settle down, maybe there, or a really few of them come back home with a lot of money.
Right. The ones that focus more on the plundering, probably.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, the people who stayed that I am descendant of, I can track my lineage back to the 1400s in Sweden, straight down. On my dad's side, not my mom's. She's Hungarian. It's a little bit more messy.
Yeah.
But those who stayed were just farmers.
Right.
They took care of the land. Sometimes some sun gone off. So those who stayed that we are from are not even really Vikings.
Right. That's a good point. When you were telling that story, I was imagining being someone who's in Istanbul or what have you, and then suddenly this enormous blonde man appears, and you're like, what? Who is that? It makes sense that they would go, hey, do you want to be my bodyguard? That's great.
Yeah. So they went down there and just earned a fortune that they couldn't get home in this, poor society where most people just have cattle and did their thing. And the big chief took all the girls.
That's so mean.
Yeah, so that's why most of them traveled off. And it was not. It's not as glorified as it is in the TV show Vikings and everything else. It's just not.
Yeah.
So I guess for us here, we are descendants of people who believed in the Asatru and were North Humanic and used those symbols and those things. Sure, but it's not much more than that, really. But we need to learn these things. I know these things because I'm a huge geek.
Well, you said you were a LARPer. So.
Yes, exactly. My sister is 11 years older than me, and she LARPed when she was 16. So when I was 5, I have been kind of brought into this on its own, quite naturally, and that's why I have kind of this interest in it and have read up a lot and learned a lot. But here in school, the Viking Age and that kind of thing, I don't even think we talk about it more than maybe a month, if even in school.
That's odd.
Yeah.
We didn't cover the history for more than that. If you were I don't know, they often call, I think what you're calling LARPing here, like Nordic Reconstructionism. It depends on how accurate your LARP is, I guess. But when they're trying to make it exactly the same as it would have been in 800 AD, like you said, when they're trying to get every single detail down to be the same, then they call that Reconstructionism. And they would be super offended if you told them they were LARPing. Like,
well,
I don't
LARPing
know.
usually are a little bit more fantasy and storytelling.
Okay,
Right,
yeah. Whacking each other with foam swords, right?
I'm sorry, one more time, please.
Whacking each other with foam swords.
Yeah, that as well. But we do it a little. It's a little bit different here than it is where you live. There is. I know that both American and Canadians use the term Nordic LARPing for a specific type of LARP, where they try to imitate how we do it over here. It's not correct though, according to me.
Of course not.
To sound pretentious, but it's a little bit different. But even we do have Reconstructionism, what you would call it as well, but it's usually also just called LARPing over here. Both of it's LARPing. Both if you do, even if you do a scene where you recreate, the AIDS outbreak in the 80s, and what happened and all the problematic things that happen over there and social situation and so on, we still call that LARPing.
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
That's a very heavy subject matter for LARP.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically improvising theater. It's what it is, and it's called if you do it in custom, and if you do have some kind of script but still not, it's still called LARPing here.
I see. Interesting.
But we also do this because we had this girl, this name Karin, in our community that's, for example, made a LARP called Vedergällningen, which is, how do I translate that? It's an Old Norse word for this bad thing you did. You did this, and it was the bad. And all that is, it's a Viking LARP where a lot of clans come together, and then the matriarch dies, and they try to summon the gods to help them figure out, and they they manage to summon Loki instead of Freya. And right, so Loki is just we have a person, actually a really close friend of mine who played Loki, who just went around and screwed everything up for everyone.
That would be such a fun role to play.
Yeah, she had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So we do that kind of thing as well, and that, I guess, is also a little bit of connecting with the heritage and actually live out that in a way.
Yeah. Also, something I realized when I was looking into this more was that, neo-Nazis are so, there's so much misogyny and, other types of bigotry beyond just racism within their, I don't know, their weird little brains. And when I was looking at the Norse pantheon, I realized, I don't know if this, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but satyr is the type of magic that can only be performed by, I got different definitions. One of them said women, and one of them said someone who's been on the receiving end of penetration. So,
a man
who's gay.
Quote Northern Magic, the book
the one you recommended.
We do not know. There are two kind of, a lot of that kind of stuff got super destroyed when the Christianity tried to plunder their way and spread their religion. So here's the thing. What we know is that there were two gods that were usually really, really worshipped. The one was Odin and Freya.
Yeah.
There are two kinds of magic in the Northern Magic that you can practice. One of them is Galdur. One of them is Sadir.
Okay.
Sadir is more of a shamanism. It's more you go into trance, you travel between worlds, you do that kind of stuff. That is really connected to Freya.
Okay, so therefore connected to femininity is where people are extending that forward to.
Yes.
Okay.
While Galdir, connected to Odin, is more incantation, more scripture, more poems, more intuition. Mostly what most Wiccans and other magic practitioners used to do. That's the old Galdir way.
Mm-hmm.
You burn a candle, you put intuition into it, you say a few phrases, and then it's done. That's the Galdir, and that's connected to Odin. The reason why when the Christianity tried to break into the Nordic area, of course, Freya as a female goddess got more burned than Odin.
Yeah.
So that's why that is more erased. And that is also why a lot of people, especially in neo-Nazism, think that Asatru and Northern magic and all of it is more male dominant because of Odin his things didn't got burned down as well. Also, his rune and his symbols were mostly preserved in really rich people houses, is the easiest way to say.
Interesting.
They didn't get plundered as much. They got left behind a little bit more. And that's why there's more trails of Odin than it is of Freya. But the story goes, it's actually Freya taught Odin some of the shamanism part, the Seidir.
Yeah, that's also what I was reading, was that that's what I was going to make, is that Odin is practicing this feminine magic, and he was like adamant to learn it, and that he had to ask Freya to teach him how to do it. And like, I feel like that whole narrative would really bother guys who are wearing the Sons of Odin like jacket or whatever.
Yeah, because unfortunately we have a lot of girls who wear it as well here, but that's a whole other issue and a whole other thing, and they get to stand behind that. I'm not. But that's the history of it. Freya was the main magic wielder basically, and that kind of magic, because there was an upswing in northern magic, especially in Sweden, during the 15 to 1600s, right before the witches burning thingy happened, where the whole savior part actually was a big thing of it. The whole put yourself in trance using belladonna and other quite poisonous things to put you in a hallucinate state and practice that kind of magic. And that is the magic who is connected to Freya.
Wormwood, would that be one? That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, probably would not surprise me.
Yeah, but okay, well, when you're describing these two different types of magic, it makes sense to me that the church would be more adamant about eradicating the Seder, about my pronunciation.
Nice. It's all right.
Variety of magic, because that doesn't fit with the way that churches conduct themselves. Whereas magic associated around lighting candles, burning incense, and reading specific words is the same thing as being at church, basically.
It's not that much of a difference.
Yeah, so that's something that they could more easily kind of warp and like adopt exactly like weave it in to get people to come over to their side. I don't know a lot about the Christianization of Germanic countries, but I do know quite a bit about the Christianization of Ireland in particular, and that's a lot of what they did there, was take gods and goddesses and then turn them into saints, or try to diminish their power by calling them fairies and stuff like that.
Yeah, here they didn't do that. They just burned everything down, basically. That's it. They didn't try to convert it. We do not really have saints that is based upon the old Asatru. We do not. In the same. I lived in Ireland, so I had so I have a little bit of connection there as well. So it's a huge difference on its own. But yeah, they mostly burned our shit down.
They took a much more direct
God on it.
Yeah.
But they were uneducated wildlings in the north, basically. That's how they were seen.
Right.
So it was easy to do, I guess. I don't know. I'm unsure.
I think that is still perpetuated to this day, of like pagans being just like you said, uneducated, wild, like crazy people, which is the same way that they described and still view Indigenous people in Canada, as an example. If we're looking at pagan religion as a pre-Christian, pre-colonialism practice, then that's a similar story of, well, this thing that you were already doing is not as high level, intelligent, sophisticated as what we're bringing you. And so people who continue to, well, not so much people who continue to practice that now, because I think that's not as bad, but when you look at history, that's always how the narrative is told, because the narrative is written by the winner of the fight.
Of course. But I also think that since they just burned everything down and converted people that way, I think that actually is one of the main reasons why at least Sweden is one of the most secular countries in the world right now. We do not have a prominent Christian faith. We do not. I think it's called that 80% of Swedish people at least do not believe in God or a God. They might believe in something, but not a God in that way.
Might be like agnostic. Right.
Yeah, so most people are agnostic. They just do not know the word though. So might call them atheism.
Right.
But because that's sure I usually call us hobby Christians. Because we do baptize their children. Some get married in church, but this has nothing to do with religion. It's a nice building.
Maybe that's why Sweden is so like egalitarian in its society compared to like North America. People are not all fired up about God.
And of course we did have, you know, if we know this Protestant, that's the Christian faith we have here.
Okay.
And that is because we were, of course, Catholic and all. That was nice. And then Luther come along and did his thing. And that happened. And then the faith has just basically run out on anyone. Everyone is like, yeah, we went to church because that was the community we had in a small, super poor country. A lot of people do not recognize that Sweden was one of the top 5 poorest countries in whole of Europe in the 1930s. So we are a really new rich country on its own, and that's all after Second World War, really. And then basically working hard and doing and socialism in its own, and you know, doing right for yourself and provide for your family, all that thing and work basically took over the church place in the society.
Right.
So that happened quite naturally, and I also think it could be because we didn't have that strong faith in the beginning of it, and we didn't have a connection to everything all around us in Christianity. They never took Odin and made him God.
Right.
They just told us he doesn't exist, this guy does.
So that didn't work as well, hey? There's a lot of Catholics in Ireland still, right?
Yeah.
Like Irish Catholics is a huge thing. And it's because they took these deities that Irish people were already worshiping and kind of mixed them together with Christianity, and that worked. Like St. Patrick, right? That was his whole
St. Patrick. Brigid is one of them.
Yeah, St. Bridget. I've got a tattoo more so of the goddess rather than the saint. I like to think, but
yeah. So that's a big thing, and I think that made it connect more to the Irish history on its own, and that made it stuck a lot more.
Yeah. Oh, and also you're talking about like modern representations of quote unquote Vikings.
Yeah.
They always hit that narrative really hard of the resistance against Christianity. You know what I mean? Like that's always the plot point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's a big thing. They killed a lot of people there. Those who did not kill was the one who reformed. But yeah, it is a huge thing. It was a big part of the whole shebang, how I could say. You know, it's a sad history on its own, but it is what it is, and we do have a society after it today. We can't deny that. We don't know what it would be otherwise. It could be better, it could be worse, it could be whatever. It is where we live right now, and we need to handle it. But I also think it's important, even for neo-Nazism, to actually feel connection to their root, but they need to learn more. They need to study it and not just slap on the Tyrone and go forth because it's the warrior sign. It's not that. And I think that if we connected more with it and they connected more with it, maybe they actually would have a little more of an understanding for things.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like if we sat them down and fed them some belladonna and like pushed them into Freya's arms, maybe they would be better.
They would die because belladonna is super poison.
Well, just give them just the right amount. Just enough. Not enough to kill you, just enough to make you hallucinate.
True. I think the most scary part for me is actually how a lot, since paganism and Wicca and all these things is starting to get an uprise right now. It's I see it gain so much more popularity all around, and even though I have been practicing for a long time, like before my teenage years, because of my family, it's have an upswing right now. Crystals are super popular. Even Instagram celebrities use them. And put on the meaning, slap on a meaning to it, and you're like, sure.
Yes.
So
Gwen's doing that. What's her name? Gwen?
I know. I have no idea.
She's the Goop actress. Do you know what I'm talking about? Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oh, yeah.
She sells like crystal yoni eggs and stuff on her weird Goop website.
Yeah, of course she does. But yeah, so that whole, it's starting to get a little bit mainstream, which I've seen that these they who have this kind of nationalism point of view actually starting to get into it as well.
Right.
And I don't know if I condone it or if I'm a little bit scared for it. I'm not deciding.
Yeah. Well, it's the same. I mean, anything can be twisted into something else. Like, that happens all the time. So that is the fear, for sure, is that the nationalist mutant version of Northern magic, like as you call it, it becomes the dominant expression. That would be terrible. I think it's even more important for people who practice it like as normal humans who aren't hateful, to be more visible and to be more adamant that this is the meaning of these symbols, not the other narrative that you've heard.
But I think that also could be a good thing in itself, because if you give a meaning of a symbol and not this, if you give them the real meaning of the symbols, then how they use it, we can't really, we can't change that. We can't make them not, because they're gonna. But if they maybe know that it's just not letters, they do have meaning, they do have a function, really, because runes and so on are mostly a function in Northern magic. And especially with the Galdir, there is really, really much function. Runes have a lot of symbolism, a lot of function in that way. Maybe they stop using it for that. I don't know.
I did one time. I had to do a really I went to, this is a weird long story, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. I was invited to a sweat lodge by an Iroquois friend of mine at the Tsutsina Reserve. So that's an indigenous reserve near Calgary, the city where I live. And during the sweat holder, in the middle of it, when everybody's melting and we've been in there for I don't even know how long, he points at me and he says, "There's an evil spirit," points, "inside your friend." And I was like, oh my God. And so then, and sure enough, the friend that he was talking about had been complaining of feeling like really off, really angry and like weird, and that he felt that there was something following him around. So having told me that, and then hearing it from
Yeah.
Hal Eagle Tail, I realized, okay, well, this seems true. And I performed a really intense cleansing for him. And then when I got home, I took a stone in my garden and I drew the Othala rune on it and like tried to use that as an anchor for protection of my home so that this wasn't going to follow me in when I was done. And that worked really, really well. Is that the type of functionality that you're referring to for runes?
Yeah, a little bit, but not really. Yeah, but just to give them that meaning so they don't create their meaning of it.
Yeah.
Like we talked a lot with this Swedish tried to creep up on me website where the meaning of the runes and where you find these like hate symbols, if we try to give them the real meaning of it and not what the neo-Nazism tried to give it.
Yeah, that's true. It would almost be better if they had it, because they're kind of, I think they're alphabetical or something. So the other symbols that aren't Norse are all mixed together. So it might be better if they presented those as a whole separate section and have it with a header that says these are actually historical and religious symbols for people.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
They are both. That's the problem. The old Futterang is usually the one who's both used as letters because they were written to, point things out in sentences on the stones and such, but they also had a meaning. But I rather have someone have the Oathing One on itself for protection or something than to have it spelled out as a hate message.
Yeah.
I rather will have that, really. Sure, if it's say they are doing that with the Tyr rune, but at the same time, kind of not.
Yeah.
Because what they use there is it's Warren, whatever. I'm sorry. I need to give my cat attention so he knows where I am because he's wondering where I am. Hold on. He's deaf and old. Hi.
Aww, little deaf old man cat.
Yeah, he's 16 years old, so he can't hear a thing, and sometimes he has stand in the middle of a room screaming for someone to go and look at him, so he is like, they're human. So, sorry. Side note.
Okay. How do you feel about people who dabble, like people who are just a vague neo-pagan dabbling with parts of Northern magic and not dedicating themselves solely to that?
Oh, that's a hard question. Northern magic in its own is not considered a closed practice in the general pagan world. I do think that you shouldn't be, as long as you read up on what you do and what the things is, then it's probably fine. I have not really decided on my thoughts on this yet because, like I said, I've seen both American and Canadians, especially on TikTok, because hello, say things about Northern religion that also through or Northern magic that just rubs me the wrong way. It's a little bit weird to feel cultural appropriated in that way because that's the closest I can get to it. I know it's not right, but it's the closest word we have for it. Makes me feel a little bit uneasy at times. It makes me feel uneasy at times, but at the same time, I don't know if I want or can gatekeep it like that. So I think that as long as you actually read up on the things, don't propagate for bad things and others. At the same time, if you want to do dark stuff, that's on you. That's gonna be on you. Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah.
That's for every practitioner thing to do. I'm not gonna judge anyone. I'm not gonna, make them not do it. I would not, but that's solely up to them. And also, I think that since the Galdir practice is basically what a lot of pagans do.
Yeah, definitely.
It is what that is. It's a hard thing to say that, oh no, or something like that.
Yeah.
But
I totally understand. Like, I totally agree
Yeah.
with you. When people get online and they start talking about something and they don't actually understand it, and especially when they're taking the stage instead of someone who does know, you know, speak on that.
Yeah.
But what I was talking about more so rather than TikTok witches was people who are practicing like privately with those symbols. Yeah.
Guy, I can't stop anyone. Go ahead. Be careful. Read up. Educate yourself. It's that's all I can say really.
Yeah.
But because it's with a lot of things when people practice. Well, now I'm not a part of a coven. I'm not that kind of witch. I'm a solitary witch out in the woods of the Swedish countryside.
Cool.
It's not even a joke. It's actually where I live. I have my house. I have my white cat.
We have a white cat too.
Oh, that's great. So I do my thing and they do theirs.
Right.
And it's just for people. People just need to be careful and, like I said, educate themselves. And that's on everything, even though it's not paganism and it's just, socialism, or if it's political or for debating or anything, just read more.
That's always good advice.
Yeah, read more, learn more. There are so much scripture and texts, and because we usually turn to articles these times of days.
Yeah.
And get all our notion about the political science and magic and so on from articles or Pinterest. All been guilty, me too. And so on, or Facebook groups where you find me and so on. But we just need to read more about everything. We do have the fact, because now not all books are great. Some are full of shit. But it's easier to get the right facts and so on, and the right function from books than from the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's easier to spot the bullshit the more that you've read.
Yes. that as well. We have actually, like I said, not gonna bash the Swedish school system or any school system, but people read less these days, and it's detrimental to our society on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Because books are just so much better.
Yeah. Well, on the Facebook groups, like you were saying, I find a lot of people who, when they get new to the group, they get added in and they say, I'm new to this. Can someone teach me how to do it? And I feel like the only reasonable response is for someone to say, okay, here's 6 books, read them all, and then come back and then we'll talk.
But the thing is, people don't want to do that. People want the easy way. Can someone just give me the short notes on it? And going, that's why I'm doing it, not to plug myself, but I do have a small little magic store here in Sweden that I created during the coronavirus.
You definitely plug it. What's it called?
Magi Shop. So MAGY shop.se.
MAGY shop.se.
Yeah, so magic without the C.
I get it.
Because in Swedish, magic is magi.
Okay. I think I've seen it spelt like that, actually, now that you mention it.
Yeah.
That's one of those words that got like half a dozen different spellings that people use.
Yeah. So, and that's the Nordic way. Both Denmark, Sweden, and Norway use that spelling. So I did that, and I really, really focus on actually getting good books on there. I have so many books, so I put on books so people just can get them books.
Great. So then if somebody wants to practice Northern Magic and they don't know where to start, they can go to your website and hook themselves up with some books that they already know are going to be the good ones because they've listened to this podcast and they know how knowledgeable you are.
Yeah, that would be great if I shipped outside of the Nordic countries.
Well, who knows? Maybe someone from Sweden will listen.
Yeah.
There was a Swedish gal in my yoga teacher training. Maybe she's listening and she'll come become a client.
But yeah, because I think that is important overall, because you can't. Magic isn't just an easy fix. People like to use it as an easy fix, both for their problems.
Yeah.
And that it would be an easy road to it. But that's when you start to, step down into cultural appropriation. That's when you start to dabble in closed practices. My best friend is part Celtic, Sami, and Caribbean. So she's dabbling in all of those 3 practices on its own. But they all are closed practices. In a way, not the Celtic one, it's not as close, but the practices of the Sami people is really closed off. Voodoo, that is for the Caribbean and her dad's side of the family, also super closed practice. And it's good to have a notion of it, but it's not really appropriate to practice.
Yeah. Well, with voodoo, aren't you supposed to specifically be trained by a knowledge holder, right?
What I know of it, I haven't asked that much because she said don't ask, and I'm like, sure. So most of it, I know, first of all, it's something to do with your bloodline. A lot of it, usually is born with it and then trained, and then also kind of, not baptized, it's not the right word, but,
like initiated.
Invited in.
Yeah.
So I could be wrong on that, but that's what I got from it.
Yeah. I think that matches with what I know or have heard about it as well. So it's either a widely misunderstood or that's right. One of the two.
Yeah, exactly. And magic isn't. I see it a lot of meditation and self-care and mindfulness, more like I'm gonna do this spell to fix my problem.
Yeah, well, I have had that conversation with a lot of people now too. I'm like you, that I grew up in a pagan family, and so I've been practicing my whole life, and I've had a lot of people now throughout the years come to me and say, like, whatever, I want to learn how to be a witch, and I usually tell them, okay, well, you should just go outside and sit there for at least half an hour. Sit under a tree for at least a half an hour. Good job, you were a witch for today. Like, I don't know. You're right. Like, the spiritual aspect of it and the meditation is so important, and so is the studying. Like, those are really the 2 pillars that it's all built on.
Well, and I think another thing of that is that so much of the non-spiritual part of it, so much of kind of meditation and intentional thinking has been co-opted by this, I don't know,
toxic positivity.
Yeah. Broadly liberal ideology of well, if you use meditation in your workplace, then you'll be more productive and you can make more money for your boss. And that's really not what it's for.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, but this is a whole, you need to find yourself. That whole thing, and you need to body, mind, and soul, all that things, and inner peace and everything that has had a huge upswing again, because it was also in the 70s a lot, at least here.
Yeah, it definitely was here too. Like that's where my mom really started to lean into it during that resurgence. In the 70s, for sure.
Yeah, and I think for my mom, it was mostly my mom and my father's. A woman on my father's side of the family is easiest to describe because the lineage is way too tricky. Did that because for my mom, it was more like she's raised super Catholic in Hungary, in Budapest, during the Russia occupation of Budapest. So she's born in 1955. The Russians invaded in 56. So she's brought up super Catholic, super restrictive, and but she still had a best friend who was Romani, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And she had those kind of connections, just that her grandma that she lived with really hid it from her. So that may, when she moved to Sweden, because my grandma is a political refugee from Hungary here,
Mm-hmm.
because they worked with nuclear weapons in Hungary and the Russian wanted them, so they fled.
Okay.
So they came here. Then both of them started to, look into tarot, look into all that kind of things instead, because it was more open and accepted here in Sweden, and it was during the 70s.
Right.
So that's the way as well I've gone in with it for my mom. But then I had on my dad's side this all relative out in the woods that helped me get rid of a wart when I was a child. Super surreal thing. She tied a little knot around it and mumbled words, and then she put the thread in a pot with soil, and when that one got rotten, the wart fell off, and it actually did.
Oh, neat.
So that's the more kind of Nordic magic that is old here in Sweden than the other things.
Right.
I
was going to say both of us have a connection to Romani practice in that way.
Yeah.
And mine is a little bit further back. Again, there's no like paper trail to prove this, but it's family like knowledge or whatever that my great grandmother was a Romani in the Ukraine. And apparently her alias was Rose, and therefore my mom gave me that as my middle name. So I have her name.
And the funny thing there is that there are runic trails from the Rus or the Vikings that actually traveled away, both in Ukraine, in Hungary, and other Slavic notion as well, because they liked to put runes on shit. I think it's actually, I don't remember where it is, but is this somewhere? It's an old temple wall, I think, and it's actually have scribbled runes on it, which basically said Johan was here.
Oh.
And that is from the Viking age.
Wow, that's hilarious. Viking age bathroom graffiti, basically.
Yeah. I need to find a link to that to be more precise for you. But so that is also a lot of Romani, and that even though it is its own faith, but it actually has a lot of trail of old Northern magic as well, since people traveled down and stayed.
Yeah. I was going to say a lot of what the practice that my family actually did growing up, like my Baba, my mom's mom, and my mom, and me now, is very centered around gardening and growing stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's very much a green, I guess they would call it green magic, green witchcraft now, or folk magic too, where you're just, rather than going by any one particular book or following any deities, you're just going into the land, like the location where you are, and learning directly from that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how most of the Northern magic works as well. In a lot of it, at least here in Sweden, way back.
Cool.
But it's really similar, and I guess that it's like with all things kind of European, since it's all so incestuous and all things alike. It's not the same because they're different culture, but it is alike. That's why it can be it could be used in that so many ways and have so similarities. We see that in our language as well. For example, knife as an English word in Sweden, it's kniv. It's not that different.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, this has been an awesome talk. Thank you so much for meeting with us and putting up with me getting my days mixed up.
There's no worries. I hope you got what you wanted.
Absolutely. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, one more time, the name of your store before we go, the website.
Yes, for the Nordic people and for the one time I actually decide to ship outside of the Nordic region, it's magishop.se or SE.
And that's spelled MAGYSHOP.se?
Yeah.
We can, we'll link to it as well.
Oh, that's so true. We'll link it, yes. And I wanted to point out before we leave too, there's a group, maybe you can help me pronounce this because there's no way I'm going to get it. It's spelled SVINFYLKING.
Please send it to me so I can read it.
Okay. The English translation is Heathens Fighting Hate, and it's like a group that is working against the co-opting of those. Do you know them?
No, I have not heard of them actually. That's great.
Yeah, I just found them when I was researching it. So Heathens Fighting Hate, they did publish a picture of Thor's hammer with the words, "This hammer smashes fascism." That's good.
That's
And then also hashtag League of Theater for places where you can get involved and show, the true meaning of the symbols.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. It's been a great time. And if you have any more questions or something, don't be afraid to contact me or anything.
Sounds great. I'm going to buy that book and then we can have a book club about it.
Oh, that would be great.
Okay, have a good rest of your night.
Same. Bye.
Bye.